Now, LBC News, 11:48, 12 minutes to the top of the hour. New research has found that 8 in 10 teachers believe there are more safeguarding concerns surrounding children today than 5 years ago, and almost all of them believe this is down to one thing, simply online exposure. On the positive side, almost all teachers feel confident that schools do remain safe environments for children. Matthew McVarish is joining us, human rights activist, and he's an abuse survivor. Matthew, thank you for sharing your story and your thoughts on this. Let's go with the positive. Schools are still safe places. Would you agree with that for 2024, I'm thinking?
I would agree, yeah, they're becoming more and more safe. I think I was sexually abused in Scotland in the 1990s, and at that time I attempted to tell a teacher, and there was really, other than her, there was really no one I could go to, and my attempt to speak with her actually fell through, so there was no other avenue for me to disclose. I think as much as safeguarding concerns are on the increase, as you said, the test study shows teachers are actually becoming more confident in addressing these issues. So although reports are up, it just means that we're becoming more effective at actually tackling and addressing these problems.
And was that teacher who you tried to engage with actually a nominated person for children's concerns, or was it almost a teacher at random who you thought you could establish a rapport with?
I literally chose that teacher because she was closest to me in age. I think I was 14 at that point, and she was 24, and I thought maybe she'd be most relatable. So I think it's good to remember that although we put a designated safeguarding lead in place, the child will literally go to who they feel most comfortable with, and that could be the janitor, that could be the kitchen staff.
Yeah.
So it's not just teachers, it's the entire workforce.
And training to that effect is commonplace. In fact, it's required now and tested by the inspection regime, isn't it? So a designated safeguarding leads are just that. They're leads, and they share their knowledge with others. But do you think, from your work in this area, that at least that part of the equation, that there is a responsible adult who will listen to a child, is now commonplace, if not the experience of every child around the country?
Yes, I think that's the minimum standard, that there is a safeguarding lead. But again, some young people and children aren't aware of what systems we put in place. So I think, as you mentioned, the fact that children as young as 5 now have iPhones and are using social media.
Well, yeah,
there's problems.
That's a whole other question, isn't it, really, as to whether that should be the case. But that's the reality we have to deal with, I suppose.
It is. I mean, the world is more complex now. There's crimes that exist today that didn't exist when I was at school. So we need to become more proactive and sophisticated in tackling them. But, the situation, although it's become critical and it's serious, it's promising. We are the only country in the world to have an online safety regulation. And this safeguarding week, we're actually addressing these issues. And there's incredible resources that exist now that schools can bring in to kind of open up the avenues for disclosure for young people.
The Safeguarding Awareness Week to which you allude, I should have said in my introduction, is part of it. It's what's going on right now. It's a requirement, is it? Maybe to refresh the memory or to expand the knowledge of practitioners, of anybody who looks after children?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's to raise awareness, it's to share best practice, it's for us to kind of open the dialogue and get a better understanding of what are the problems, because it is very complex just now. Sexual violence is mostly what I focus on, ending that globally, actually. But cyberbullying is another concern. And so it's, the sharing of explicit images between consenting young people. It's very, very complex now. And I think even parents can feel overwhelmed. But I would say if you have children, before they go to bed tonight, just look them in the eye and say, do you know there's nothing you can't speak to me about? And if we did that, if we became the generation that opened up the dialogue in our homes, we could literally make a major change in this.
And you say that because you fear there are some young people for whom they're trapped in a sort of silent world where they don't know where to turn.
Well, there's the situation of sextortion, which is horrendous, and the young people feel very. You better
just explain that to us in case people haven't come across that, Matthew.
Well, that's when an individual would target a young person and then groom them until they've shared an image, and then an explicit image, and then use that to make them do other things. And then the child feels that if they tell their parents or anyone that this is going on, that they'll be in trouble. And of course, the young person is the victim entirely through this experience. So young people were showing in the research they actually prefer to just delete and block people instead of reporting it. And that means that we need to become more active as adults and encourage them to make sure that they understand it's not their fault, that there are deviant individuals who are targeting young people. So the young person is never in the wrong, but we need to help them understand that, because I think there's so much shame around this.
Even today, even with those lectures, even with the lessons, even with the, social groups in school being talked to by teachers and by the safeguarding lead, you still fear that there are youngsters for whom they don't know what to do when confronted with something of that ilk?
I think, for me, part of the reason I didn't disclose was because, if you imagine, if I go to a teacher and tell them what my uncle was doing to me at that point, I had to give that adult the mental image of me, obviously naked, and being in a very, very vulnerable situation. And I think if you're a teenager, particularly during puberty, the worst thing you want to be is naked, especially in someone else's imagination, and especially your teacher. So for a young person to disclose these kind of things is incredibly brave, incredibly difficult, and we need to make that as easy as possible for them, so that they understand that none of this is their fault. And of course, it is a difficult conversation to have, but we need to try and make that comfortable for them, because if a child is being targeted, it's quite likely that the person who's targeting them is targeting other children. So from a child protection point of view, it's crucial that we get better as a society at dealing with this.
I understand that, and our conversation is not expressly about phones, but you alluded to it. Have you reached a personal view, Matthew, as to whether you think youngsters should not certainly have a smartphone, but if they needed a phone just to check in with parents or mum and dad for a journey to school or whatever, then a dumb phone is appropriate until they're into their teens, isn't it?
I think it's hard for us. I mean, I'm 41. It's hard for us to imagine that these cyber natives, the young people living up in growing up in a digital space, many young people don't differentiate their online profile to their offline self, and that's hard for us as adults to grasp.
And I'm a generation further on, so, OK, I'm trying to understand it. But listen, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us this morning, and we will speak again, I'm sure. Dr. Matthew McVarish, who's a writer and a human rights activist, and part of that TES Safeguarding Week.